flat, all that. You know what the problem was? What? Screen resolution? Nothing. 14 of the 16 computers had their monitors turned on. That was it. So, help make sure Germany and Mars, when they leave, all the monitors are on, not off. Yeah, the two that work were the only two that were on. Computers were on, but not the monitors. At least it was easy. I mean, what some, significant issues. We'll find out tomorrow night, probably. We're doing, I think it's at 5:30 tomorrow. And that was the last time I had a steering committee meeting, 4. So the math results are coming in. So, overall not bad, but it was down this year across the board. So, there's math rate was around 60%. Up your game. What do they call it? Be down this year? Influx of students, or the rumor I heard was influx of yes. It had been out for 1 to 2 years and reapplied to residency. I know 2 residency slots for doing this. So that fits what I kind of heard. So that's the secret to it is not really a secret. Is the more clinic time you get, that's better off and more. And that's we're seeing that in residency directors as well as noted because the less time they have to show you where everything is, the more time you come straight in and start doing stuff. And so a lot of times senior residents are ones that are sort of tasked with getting you acclimated. So you get on their good side too, because you come in, I've already been to the clinic, yeah, I've already done this, I've already done this. So really the big thing is here's bathroom, you pray for it. And you've seen stuff, then you come right in and it just becomes easier, much easier stuff. Yeah. But I think that's just with what I was seeing. So that's it's competitive, it's big numbers. So in the fall, we're going to be doing mock residency here. We've done this for 2 years now. Previous group was relatively non-responsive. Going piece, this is going to be mandatory this fall. Okay, so we'll set that up to be an early fall. That's we'll something, but it'll be a panel of 3. It's usually me, Ramsey, and Heather that will do the interviews, and you'll be required to come in. We'll do it on Zoom because since most of the residency interviews stay Zoom, it comes into the same format that you're used to that. And you're not going to know us, and we're going to go your resident, you're going to be asked questions just similar to what you get on residency, and then we can teach you anything. So what we find is there are some students that are like really, really good students that suck at interview. I mean, it's not going to be nice. And some that were marginal students could out interview anyone. And so you can't base it on like, hey, I'm a good student, that's not even relevant. The interview process, especially in a digital process, is a different experience, right? If you're in a room with somebody, you can lie, like, I'm teaching, I can see when you're all dozing off, I can see when you're all like, oh my God, we're in the closet, okay, I got that. But in a residency interview on Zoom, you can't see any of it. And you can't kind of get a feel for what room, you can't see people on camera, you can't see all those kind of things that are happening. So it's part of that. Part of that. And we've had students in that, and one student who kept rocking his chair back and forth. He was actually going there, and so he said, stop. We couldn't do that. He didn't even know it because you're just trying to pass the time. So we'll go through that, but they will be mandatory. And it really will benefit you as you go into the residency interview process. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and jump in and get started. It's either early or start, you know. So, I had a couple weeks off. You had a proton lecture, and everybody enjoy it. Good. Learn about proton gradient. Latent proton solve everything. Solve all your problems. Got a headache? Get the shock proton. So yeah, I think it's important to get some exposure to protons. Protons are still a small segment of the medical physics spectrum, but they're getting bigger and there's more of them. And whether they stay or how big a footprint they have is a different conversation because that's more economic based than anything else. But I think it's important to know there's going to be opportunities for some people to go to proton if you want to. Some people like that, some people don't. But I think it's important to understand the physics of it. Did Hedrick talk about flash therapy at all? It's a shock. It's a very what flash therapy. Have you all heard of flash therapy, right? Okay. So flash therapy really is primarily focused with protons. So it's a big selling point because you're delivering all this dose in a fraction of a second. And so it's really, really interesting from that standpoint. That's really could be the salvation for proton therapy long term. But anyway, it's good stuff. So I'm glad you got something out of it. So now we're going to talk about brachytherapy. What brachytherapy, TG43, some of this I know you've already been exposed to. Low dose rates, cesium. It's important to talk about cesium. No one does it anymore. And I say no one very tongue in cheek. There are a few places that still do cesium, but I would recommend that to you. Iron, palladium, we'll talk about that. Those are seed implants. There's also cesium seed implants. And different applications, HDR, Iridium 192, different applications, electronic EHDR. The reason I include it is because it really is kind of a unique treatment technique. It is used, and there's some clinical trials going on now and some opportunities in EHDR to discuss. So we start talking about brachytherapy definitions. It's type of radiation therapy when radioactive material sealed in needles, deep wire or catheters is placed directly into a nerve tumor. It's also called implant radiation therapy, internal radiation therapy, and radiation brachytherapy. So they can have a host of different names. So the reason I say that is because depending on who you're talking to, they're going to kind of reference things differently. And you want to, at least try to say that you couldn't see this variation. Once you get to clinic, you're going to see like stereotactic. Some people call, stereotyped brain SRS. Some people call fractionated SRS. Some people call SBRT, SART, or SAVR, stereotactic ablative radiation. They have different names. You just sometimes it's good to get a little bit of the different lingo to know what it is. Have you all read TG43? Now, I don't mean you picked it up and looked at it, but have you read it? Because I know you haven't because it's dull. Okay, so I do highly recommend, and that will be homework assignment TG43. TG43 is the basis for brachytherapy. It has all your data, all your information, how you handle it, how you work with it. We could have multiple sessions, lectures on TG43 one. There's a lot to it. And there is an addendum to TG43. You see here this update, provide additional updates to the original report. It's important to be aware of that as well. It is the standard. So anytime anybody's talking about brachytherapy, you're going to want to go TG43. That's the one that's going to be the base one. You've seen TG51, right? And we talked about probably last semester over here in Ranch's class. 51 was an update to what test? Does anybody remember? What was the calibration protocol before 51? It has a 1. Second number is a 1. It's 1, 10. 2, 11, 1, 31, 41. 41. No. 21. All right, there you go. Again, come on. So TG21 was the original calibration protocol not original, but really the mainstay for physics forever. Back, I want to say 20 years ago, maybe, is when 51 came out and created a big hubbub. Everybody freaked out. Nobody wanted 51. It was a slight variation of source. Okay. Calibrations, your calibration might go 1.5% difference, but that was it. Okay. But it was enough to freak people out. You're going to find physicists, I mean, I'd say, you're going to be one of them. So you got to accept the fact they're going to be weird. You're going to be characterized as weird. People don't really know what to do with us a lot of times. When you start doing calibrations, you get comfortable, right? I like to see the same numbers every month. Some physicists are a little too ridiculous about that, but they like consistency and constantly just seeing the same thing. So when you calibrate 6x beam this month, or you check the calibration and it's 1 rad per MU, and your life is good, you're like, I'm getting out of here at Union tonight. And when you calibrate the next one, 1.1, excuse me, 1% variation, you're going to freak out. Trust me, you won't now, but you will then. You go, wait a minute, why is it 1% difference? What happened? People don't like those changes. They don't like that kind of variation in calibrations. So it's important when we make changes like this update is a little different than a 21 to 51. This is usually updating different types of sources and a little bit more parameters. So when you look up TT43, it's going to be a homework assignment. I'm going to give you because I think you'll miss this. It's going to be focusing on TT43. It is not widely used. And I say this because it's not widely used. And you're going to go to some centers that are not going to do brachy at all. And you're going to go to some centers that do a lot of brachy. So like in Knoxville, Tanoa is the only one that does seed implants. In Knoxville, all 3 do HDR. In Knoxville, there's Cobalt with Gamma Knife. Ironically, right? Gamma Knife is brachytherapy, or is it not? Kind of weird, right? You're using Cobalt, but it's not inserted in the patient. Okay. So, but that to me is similar, right? It's a similar type of treatment because you're using a radioactive material. So there's a variation. Then you may go to a center that's super busy and does absolutely 0 brachytherapy. And there's a lot of reasons. Anybody know the number one reason a lot of people don't do brachytherapy?
I mean, at least from a patient standpoint, it seemed really scary. Just have radiation was inside of you.
There's truth to that, but they don't know any better. You can tell they don't really get it. I mean, that's the beauty about patients. You're going to figure that out. When they go in, so when you go into patients, I'm not saying that kind of fun, but it really is true. So, okay, this is a moment's moment. I haven't seen this. She comes in without a boot, without crutches. So, congratulations. All right, excellent. So when you go in and work with patients and you say, okay, I'm going to do brachytherapy. Most of them will say, okay, because they'll do what the physician recommends. That's the vast majority. But why would maybe a physician not recommend brachytherapy? Invasive. It's invasive. That's one. That's a good reason. Any others?
They're like really damaged to it.
I kind of think there probably is an advantage in some cancers. It's very advantageous. We'll be talking about that. But what's another? That's actually nothing. What's the one thing I keep telling you about that? I'm probably talking about this much, but you'll figure it out.
Really?
Okay, I have caught some other subjects. Billing. If people don't get paid well, Bracket does not pay near well external people. They're not going to want to do it. And it kind of, you have billing here, but you have to kind of put a connecting dot to it. Physician time, right? A physician in Bracket has to get hands-on, right? In the clinic, the physicians don't get hands-on so much. Simulation, they approve a plan, they review images, and that's kind of it. But in Bracket, they're usually inserting either a template, a wire, a mesh, or some sort of device, whether it be a cervical applicator. They're going to insert. So it's their time, right? I mean, suddenly now they're getting involved with the patient. Some physicians don't really care to do that. So they look at it as a drain on their time. Some physicians very much watch what they get paid versus the amount of time and effort they have to go in. That's really what hurt Bracky for the most part, to be honest with you. Across the board was reimbursement kind of changed a number of years back. And Bracky tended to fade off. So it is still used. And people, like I just told you, so some sites that here in Knoxville currently have it. But when we start looking at the number of patients that have it, okay, the number of patients that have it, is a very small percentage. And it's very rarely the primary treatment. So let me ask you this. What type of BRCA treatment would most likely be used as a primary treatment? Yeah, yeah, could be. More common as a boost, but you can do as primary. What else? Prostate. Prostate is probably the most primary. And that can be done high dose rate and low dose rate. Uh, so it's um, so it's a little bit back and forth. So we talk about reimbursement, a lot of RAM licensing, red tape. You have to have a regular serial license. You have to do a lot of signatures. You have to do a lot of surveys. There's additional equipment. There's additional costs. There's a lot to it. And from a RAD safety perspective, and so um, you deal with that. Specialization of physicians and especially, I don't want to be specializations, especially, okay, but it's most physicians aren't trained in it, and that's the issue. So, but the key thing does remain consistent. It's very effective, and that's why it still has a mainstay to go on. So the original is LDR. LDR, low dose rate. Low dose rate means slow. Okay, over a long period of time. Back in the day, other than CD implants, I don't know anything that's low dose right now. Almost no one does this right. So it says it's cancer therapy, cancer involves placement of radioactive control directly inside the body of the nerve tumor a specific amount of time and then withdrawal. In LDR brachytherapy, the patient is treated with low dose radiation for hours at a time. This is somewhat misleading because it says it's withdrawal. Seed implants, you don't withdraw, right? Seed implants are permanent implants by design, so you don't actually withdraw them from the patient. So that's a bit of a misleading definition. But it usually is for hours. Okay, so they're for a period of time that a patient has the device inserted. So the most common one is cesium-137. That is by far and away the most common isotope used in low dose radiotherapy. What's an advantage? So I recommend here is a long half-life. That is the main advantage for cesium-137. That's why a lot of people use it. And it's got a nice energy. 0.662 is a really nice energy. So that's why a lot of people use cesium. They didn't have to change it out. They didn't have to deal with it as much. You would get a source and you could have it really for, effectively basically a half life. So disadvantage is difficult to dispose of. You can't game take it. Cesium, once you got it kind of, it's kind of like giving a tag or it thing. There's nobody to tag, you got it. I mean, you cannot, I have tried, I had cesium sources most I knew. I couldn't give it. I mean, I can give them away. I mean, you can't technically give them away, but I wouldn't give them away. I actually had there's a down in Barwell, South Carolina, there's a low dose rate long-term disposal site, and they would open up each year to a certain amount of cesium. And it was like worse than getting taken to, more like Taylor Swift. Okay. It would open up and you would call them and like, that's already gone. It was like 5 minutes ago when you said like 1 o'clock today, like it's already gone. I mean, people would, because they just want to get rid of their cesium because there's nowhere to put it, there's nowhere to go. It is not going anywhere. What's half-life on cesium? Like 30 years. So it's a long time. It's gonna outlast all of us. Okay, it's going to be there. So what these facilities struggle with is like, I don't know what to do with it, right? I don't know where to get rid of it. So they end up carrying this radioactive material license and carrying this hot lab. We're not even getting talking about regulations yet about surveys and inventory and all the things that go into it. Okay? There are complications in low dose radiotherapy, which we're going to talk about. Because that's an important aspect. That's one of the problems with LDR, and that's one reason it began to fade out. So it's used primarily for GYN cancer. Cesium is used for cannabinoid ovoids, and that's really the primary application. So why do you think there could be a high risk of complications in cesium? Not cesium, not the isotope in particular, but doing a cesium implant. What would be a reason for it? What would this page might lead you to that idea?
Sit there for hours at a time, there's bottleneck, I think that expense to.
That's one of the problems. So patients with this implant are highly radioactive. They're in assigned rooms. Usually the rooms are shielded or away from everyone else. We had a room specifically shielded. And then you have these big roller shields that you would put at the foot of the bed. You'd have to stay on the side of the shield, roll it up in order to reduce your exposure. So that's one of the big problems is just exposure. Take care of the patient, right? What's another potential complication? That's true. The longer you have it in there, the more opportunity there is for something to dislodge. We've had patients whacked out on pain meds, get up and walk down the hall with their applicator and seizing in place. You have patients who pull the applicator out, okay, just because of hallucinations on pain meds. So you have a big, huge issue with that. What's another potential complication? It's a lot of time for clinic staff. It is a lot of time. I mean, the nursing staff hated us when we have a seizing patient. They're like, seriously, because they have all the stuff. They have to wear their little, dosimeters. They have to sign in and out of the room. They have to worry about if they have a nurse that's pregnant. They have to worry about how long they're going to be in the room. They have to monitor the patient. It's a lot. So the one last area that's a big complication issue, which probably is not readily evident, is patient health. Okay. We talk about hours. They're laying sometimes in bed for 72 hours flat. Okay. They don't get up at all. So you have a high risk for blood clots on those patients. And we had a patient one time that the physician I showed up full of cesium for the patient. And we showed up and we came in and the husband said, she's not acting right this morning. So we went in and she had a stroke. From not indirectly from the implant, right? She'd been there for 72 hours and the implant she had to do it. She ended up having a stroke. So that's one of the issues you have when you can't move, right? That's why everybody tells you get up and move, don't sit in the same spot, everything else. So that's a risk you run when you're running with long hours on hours on hours type of implant. It's a much higher risk. Okay. So that's the life and story of cesium. Still out there. There's a chance you may go somewhere that may still have it. They're probably not using it. I know maybe one site that still uses it, but I wouldn't recommend this to anyone. So these are applicators. A lot of hardware. Anybody know what this is here? Cannabinoid boys. Okay. So have y'all seen a cannabinoid boy? You can recognize it. That's why I'm asking these questions. So
No, it looks different.
huh?
It's a different model than what we got.
It's a little different. Yes, and all of them are a little different. So what is the purpose of cannabinoid? What's the purpose of the thing?
Goes into the uterus.
goes into the uterus. So you have to be very careful on the insertion of the tandem that you don't perforate the uterus. That does happen. So we'll talk about that during when you're discussing the planning piece, but you always worry, and this can be done with LDR, HDR, you can perforate the uterus if you insert it too far. There are multiple angles, right, on the tandem, and it depends on the curvature of which is the right tandem. These are ovoids. Sources go in there. What you're used to seeing, you see these round caps, and that wasn't on there. So you normally see the caps put on top. Well, what is the purpose of the caps? Those who pull that tissue away from it so it doesn't break from, right? You know, it's a lot of dose. You're talking a lot of rads coming out of here for 72 hours, you know, in contact with tissue. Yeah. So does anybody know what this is?
Is that is that like a kind of a seal or?
It's your cervical top of your os, goes right up there. That's normally come right up with the
Yeah, that's.
well, there is a sleeve. So here's how you can do the implant a couple ways. You can just manually do the implant, right, without a sleeve. Well, most patients are multiple implants, right? They'll get one, they'll get two, they'll get three, sometimes they'll get five implants. Not on LDR, usually only two. If you're going to do repeated insertion, they put a sleeve in it, suture it in, and they just run it through the sleeve, so it's much easier to do the insertion. If they do not use a sleeve, the patient has to be under penile anesthesia. Okay, because you can't insert this. We've done it without not working. It can be very. So you can see how it goes in here, rectum, bladder. So these are how these are positioned, and you see this on imaging. Okay, when you position this, and there are ways to do the calculations on this, and we're not going to get into the season, which I will spend a lot of time on. But for y'all heard of point A and point B? Yeah, now those are not the only points. There's M's too, which are similar to A's, not okay. Some of them are different, have different relevance. And you know which one goes to the curvature of the canyon? See, this is a perfect implant that doesn't exist. Okay. Well, what happens if this tandem turn?
There's an uneven dose.
Huh?
It would be uneven.
Points of rotate. So we used to do this back in the dark ages, okay, with plain film. We do an AP film, a lateral film, lay them over, and do a transposition of positions of the sources. I mean, you all trust me, scream this day and age, you have to do that. It was horrible. Because it was very, we'd take an x-ray, put dummy sources in, and you would mark them with a pencil, and you see what that, now it's all done through your phone, right? It's done automated. But these points have to be done correctly. And you all know what point B is, and point A is, and the distance above the point or the caps up to over in the over. And it's supposed to represent different points, right? It's supposed to represent different doses, pelvic wall dose, stuff like that. And it's perfectly fine. I mean, like I said, everybody has a different way. I used to do A's and B's. I went to another clinic and they're like, no, I do point M. Point M and it was slightly different adjustments for point B systems. So that's what they're used for. Like I said, it's very effective treatment. I mean, patients do extremely well with this. What is one reason you see less tandem and ovoid implants now? This kind of information. Not just HDR too. Why do you see less?
There's less cervical cancer.
Yeah, there's less. What else? This external being getting better and better, like there's kind of matching.
So you don't have to go through all the.
That's a fair point.
You don't have to go through all
That's a fair point.
the.
One thing you're all, everything you said so far is perfectly correct. There's one thing you're not thinking about is a little further upstream. Remember, radons, radiation oncology is the bottom. Okay, we're the last thing, right? I mean, it comes down, it goes through primary care, specialists, surgeons, oncologists, and then radons at the bottom. Catch my- That help you at all? You don't hear. Just treat it another way. Without radiation. You're really close. Thank you. Yes, hysterectomies. The number of hysterectomies has gone up significantly. The only reason you would do a tandem ovoid is if you did not do a hysterectomy. So as hysterectomies have become more prevalent and more efficient, the number of need for a tandem ovoid has dropped. Okay, so not necessarily bad, right? I mean, these are rough treatments. Now, that still doesn't stop the potential for there to be recurrences of the vaginal cup. And we'll talk about how you treat that. There's treatments for that, but it's much easier. This type here, though, has gone because surgeons are doing more hysterectomies than they used to, for the most part. And it is regional. Some surgeons don't do it as much. Some surgeons do a little bit more. You'll find that when you get clinical practice. Where you're at is where you're at. It doesn't matter what the nation's doing. I've gone to places where neurologists will send absolutely everyone for radiation. We had a neurology group when I was down in Tampa, did not care about doing prostatectomies, 100% go to radiation. And then I've been in places where urologists say radiation is the bane of all existence, and every complication you have is going to be radiation related. I have to do surgery on everybody. So it's where you're at is where you get the experience. So you find these things out, right? You find these things out. So anyway, that's kind of the long story short of cesium-137. It's the most popular application, where it currently stands in the market, and kind of how it is good and bad. So this is a nice little tandem and ring. Have y'all seen tandem and ring? Okay, when would you do a tandem and ring? HDR, right? Yeah. So the ring applicator can be done with with HDR. A lot of people have started doing that, to be honest with you, on some of the ring applications. So LDR brachytherapy. This is brachytherapy really, I like seed implants. Seed implants are really cool, and there's some challenges with them. But this is a really good picture. This is the exact size of a seed, and it is silver, and it is hard to find when you draw it. Yeah, I'm just gonna warn you now. You'll be in a situation one time where a seed's getting up on the floor and you may never find it. They're really small, and they're light. There's no weight to them at all, and they're you may have it like if I'm using item 125. What would be an average activity you think that we use millicuries for a patient implant? Tough question. I know. Throw something out there. Just don't be like 5 curies. Do this. Not maybe. What would you think you put? Activity per seed.
Well, how many seeds is it usually?
Depends on the prostate. Depends on the plant. So how the activity per seed, just fall. Just see how far you're all off. That's all. But it's not bad. Not terrible. Terrible. Anybody got another one? Need a little more heat. A little more heat than 0.03 milligrams.
And what trees?
I want to kill it. Trying to get rid of trying to get rid of their cancer, not trying to kill it. Right? Okay. 0.03 is much closer than 10.
I'll say,
10 extremes.
I'll say 0.8 millicuries.
They're going to have some burning. So let's go down a little. cut it at 0.4. 0.4 military per seat is a good average activity that you use with item when they're involved. Okay, for a primary seed implant. Okay, does anybody know what the prescription dose is for a primary seed implant? For item. If I'm going to do monotherapy, you're giving seed implant only, what is the primary? What would be the prescribed dose? A lot. I'll take that one. Very a lot. The 411, 10 military seeds. Any idea if I want to throw a number out? It's not terrible. I mean, I'm going to be, I want to go after you. You're wrong. Well, it's 20 grand? Much higher. 70. Much higher.
150.
145? So, 14,500 rads is the primary prescription dose for monotherapy item. It's a lot, right? I mean, you start thinking of 14,500 rads, that's a lot of dose on a patient. And where is that prescribed to? Dude, it's not enough to say I'm prescribing 10 gray. Where are you putting that 10 gray? That's always the question you need to ask when a doctor says I'm prescribing 20 gray at 5 fractions. But what is your 20 gray to? Is it to PTB? Is it to another? Is it a percentage of the volume? To a point? Prescriptions need to be very definitive. So in prostate cancer, when we're talking about 145 gray, it's prescription dose. Where am I putting that 145 gray? Prostate. That's good. That's the first possible step. You want to do the prostate. Okay. However, if you were going to plan this for Dr. X and you told them, I'm going to deliver that 145 grade, what is a good plan look to? I mean, when you're going to have someone call them back and say, I did it. So what's it going to look like? Where's that 145 grade at? You don't want to say it. ITV. Don't give me a number. Where is it? I'm looking at it. You called me over and said, Dr. Please come take a look at this prostate. It's ready. And I look at him and I start laughing. I'm like, what are you talking about? Wait a minute. Where's the 145 grade line? What am I looking at? Where do I want 145 grade to be? This is pretty easy stuff. But if you don't play golf, maybe it's hard. But it's not 30-foot putt. It's like 3-foot putt. Where? I got prostate cancer. In theory, I don't totally know where the cancer is in the prostate. Where do I want the prescription dose? Volume, entire prostate. So that's what I'm looking for. I want 145 gray to go around the entire prostate. Because in theory, I might have an idea where the cancer is because, we can talk a little bit about how they get biopsies in the prostate. It's going to make it a little concern for us guys. It should, because if they there's a way they can miss cancer very easily. Probably. So you want the entire gland to be covered by her. Some doctors will say, I want a half cm margin, but a half cm expansion on the prostate. I want the 145 gray to go to that one. That's not as common as it used to be, but there are physicians who do that. So if you find yourself one day in a clinic randomly and being asked to plan a prostate cancer case, they say, I want 145 gray. You have to say, okay, but where do you want it to? Do you want it to the edge of the prostate? Do you want a margin around the prostate? How do you want it to be? Okay. So you can imagine there's challenges with this, right? So if I want 145 gray around the edge of the prostate, that means inside is going to get hot, right? I mean, it's the only way it's going to be. So we have to start talking about this. So one of the challenges of prostate, so one of the challenges of prostate cancer is doing seed plants, and I love seed plants, kind of like, solving a puzzle. Because every patient is different, right? Every prostate is different. This is truly patient-specific planning. So I've got some guys with really big prostates, others come with really small prostates. Just anecdotally, which do you think is easier to plan, a big prostate or a small prostate? Yeah, I think you should.
I mean, I could do small.
Okay, who thinks big's easier to plan? There are a couple. Who thinks small? Big. Because as in, yeah, I didn't like this, but I'm gonna go back to one of my previous lectures. Remember, you gotta put dose somewhere? We always talk about stereotactic, you need to make it like really hot in the middle, or drive the dose out, and have more dose, spillage, low dose. Same with prostate. That heat's going somewhere. So if I got a really small gland, I got nowhere to put it other than in the gland. And then what happens? What's in the middle of the prostate? They have to have what's in the middle of the prostate? Urethra. Okay. Urethra has dose constraints on it. So you can't just bury it. I mean, you used to joke, like, why don't you put a 10 curie seed? Back, 10 curie seed in the middle of the prostate, or maybe 10 millicurie seed, middle of the prostate, and let it just radiate out and do the whole thing. Well, then, you flame for okay. I mean, there's no way. I mean, it would burn through the urethra. So you can't do that. So you have to kind of move the dose around a little bit. Small glands have nowhere to put the dose. The seeds are so hot. So we'll talk a little bit about how you can do that. A typical prostate. You might know about the size of a typical prostate. A little bigger than a walnut. Walnuts are bigger than a walnut. Some are really small. And it's funny, the smallest guy and the biggest prostate. Weird, but it's very true. I have probably done 300 to 400 seeded plants. Okay, so I've seen everything there is to see. Literally everything. And it has been consistent. Small guys have massive plants. And I don't really understand why. So that is not an advantage. It is problematic because we have cutoffs, and we're going to talk about that during the planning, why you would not want to plant a large plant. Okay. So if you've got a prostate, this is perfect, right? This is where you want it. We already know the rectums here, the bladders here, that's just a given. But what we talk about, one of the benefits of brachytherapy, right? It's quick dose follow. That's why brachytherapy is so great. Because I can put all these seeds in here, and this dose just falls away. So the bladder and rectal doses are very low. External beam, I got to blast right through it, but in brachytherapy, I'm blasting an exit dose into it, as opposed to entrance dose. So you get a little bit better opportunity. So the question is, some people compare brachytherapy seed implants to battleship. Okay, I won't go as far as to say that, but you basically get a grip. And you can put seeds in these little grid spots. That's the only spot that you need. Okay. And these are your 0.4 millicurie seeds. Okay, for primary good. So as you put them in, the dose calculation occurs. It updates immediately, and I can see dose beginning to form around the prostate. So there's a lot of ways to implant. We're not going to go through the whole way you can implant a prostate out here. It's one you need to know. But if you do a clinical rotation to know, you'll see it, because we're the only ones that do see it. But you go around and you put this in this grid, and it really becomes kind of a cat and mouse game. You're like, I'm going to add a seed here, but I may have to take a seed here. Because what happens is, I have another gland slice here, another here, another here, another here, another here. We're cutting through in 0.5 cm increments. So you take an ultrasound of the patient's prostate, and you do it in half cm spaces, and you implant the seeds in different loading patterns throughout the prostate. Okay, I see what I got to push the prostate. So this is the probe. This is the template. We talked about the template, right? There's a template that goes up against the perineum. And then the needle is pushed through here and into the prostate. This is the urethra. So that's what you got to avoid. Okay. At all costs. Urethra will ruin your day. So that's the bladder and that's the transrectal. So it's a very simple setup procedure. Okay. The patient goes in, you can set them up in probably 10 minutes. And this is a metal grid that makes disposable grids too, but it goes up and has the holes in the predetermined positions. So you go in and the physicist is usually telling the physician J5, A6, and they're putting the needles in those positions. These needles are about this long. Okay. There's several ways to do a prostate implant. We're not going to go through all of them, but preloaded needles is the most common. All the needles are from the pre-planned generated sterile needles, and it's really quick to do. You can also do what they call a MIC gun, which is a long gun that has a seed cartridge on it with seeds, and you literally go in and draw it manually. That can be problematic. I've done MIC, and it's nice, but when we talk about seeds fall, I mean, you're going to have a seed out, it's going to be a. And then there's live intraoperative plan, where you go in without any knowledge of the way this gland works, and you do everything live. And some people love it. I hate that. I like to know what I'm going to do when I go in the OR, right? I know the pattern, I know the seeds, I know the size of the gland, I know what's going to happen. So this is the typical setup for seeding gland. And that was the kind of lattice grid I was using here. So the problem with urethra is it's usually right in the middle. Okay. So if you insert a needle in the urethra, you can't leave it there. Okay, because the seeds are exposed or in the urethra, it will be problematic. So when they go in to do the cystoscopy afterwards to remove any seed from the bladder, they'll go through the urethra and we can find seeds. And that's where you'll most often find it if you did it. So we've learned to try to perfect getting around that. Rarely do we end up any seeds. Almost never in the bladder. So you go through this process. The seed implant takes, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes by probably a skilled physician. I worked in different positions. I had one that would be done in 20 minutes, and that's if you had a cup of coffee during the implant. And I had one that would do an hour and a half. It was painful to watch. But their success rate was the second, right? I mean, they were both very successful in doing it. So either way it works. But it's really cool. Like I said, if you rotate your to know, you'll see it. Because we do go quite regular. We'll come back to this second. So that was item 125, palladium 103. Now you notice here, look at the energy difference. Okay. Lower energy, right? Okay. And the half-life is 17 days. Okay. So, but what is the difference in palladium and iodine? Let me back up. Is there a prescription dose difference? Not really. Lured you all in. So there is. So there is a monotherapy prescription dose and a boost prescription dose for iodine and palladium. So we talked about monotherapy earlier, the 145 gray, right? You can do monotherapy with palladium as well. Either one can be used as a boost therapy. And the point, why would somebody get a boost of seeds? And what that means is they're going to get, let's say, 45 gray external beam prostate, and then they're going to get a boost of seeds. Why would you do that? And not monotherapy.
If you're having issues maintaining OARs, external beam.
That's possible. That's possible. What else? Yeah, there's potential for extracapsular decrease. That would be a reason that you would want to do a larger field radiation initially, and then follow up with a prostate only C use. Is why you would switch to it. Yeah. They're commonly used, for stage prostate cancer, semen cancer, affecting treatment stage, items used in cancer. Recent less than 6. Now, this is not totally correct anymore. Iodine is considered, until there's a new paper that came out actually last week we discussed. Iodine 125 is often used for cancer blue, but Gleason less than 6. Can anybody explain why you use it for Gleason less than 6? Do you know what a Gleason score is? Okay, so Gleason score kind of measures the aggressiveness of the tumor. High Gleason, high grade tumor. Low Gleason, low grade tumor. So the thought process is why not use iodine 25 for slow growing tumor, generally Gleason's less than 6? Because iodine's got a long half-life, delivers the dose slowly over a period of time, and that's kind of what you want, right? So you do the palladium's used for cancer that Gleason greater than 7 because it's a little bit more hybrid and it delivers the dose quicker. Oops. So you see the half-life of palladium is 17 days. So the argument is it delivers it fast. 170 days, it's gone. Palladium's delivered all its radiation in 170 days. Iodine is 600 days. So it's a huge difference in delivery time, right? So you have to be mindful of that. So that was the argument behind that slide. And that's what honestly followed in the field. Those were the two the criteria that's most often seen. There was a paper, I was just given it last week. They compare, this was an non-industry study, it was a medical facility study, okay? And meaning it was done by hospitals and academics. They compared the efficacy of iodine versus palladium for prostate cancer as a whole, not the vitamin. And the results came out, palladium's better. Palladium's better even for lower Gleason scores. It has lower side effects and is more effective at local control based on this multi-institutional problem. So it was compelling enough that our Radon, the one we have out at Turkey Creek that does the implants, is going to switch to start doing some palladium. Who has always done iodine, but after reading the report, and I agree with him after looking at the study published, it was reasonable to start doing palladium.
What are your normal side effects?
Normal side effects be incontinence, burning, just general discomfort. They generally resolve over time. Okay. It's easy for us to say, right? You know, if you're not experiencing it, it's always easy to say to a patient, you're gonna have to get better or not. But when you just got this iodine implant and it's going to be delivering radiation for 600 days, you're like, you got side effects. Well, they'll get better in 2 months. That doesn't really bode well. So reducing those side effects is beneficial to it. But you can get some impotency to see them with too, not near tolerated stuff. Full. So there's multiple types of insertion methods. We talk about NIC, preloaded in real time. Like I said, advantages and disadvantages to all of us, to be honest. So this is what a typical seed implant looks like. The red is usually the prostate. The green is where seeds are located. And then these are the isotopes. So this green thing in the middle, urethra. Okay. That would be a focal point. So whenever we do treatment planning on prostates, and again, somebody comes to know about making them do some plans, so I can just sit back and do it. But it's really fun to do because you see the challenges, right? You see the challenges of getting coverage while reducing coverage to the urethra. It's not as easy as it looks. So we use Veriseed, which is manufactured by Varian, very, very popular. And it's very effective at playing. It has some automated kind of optimization algorithms to kind of get you started. Rarely, if you hit optimization, you control several factors. Can you generate a plan that can right out of the box? It's perfect. I think I've done it once. And it was fortunate in time I needed a really quick plan because of this for a variety of reasons. And we pulled it out and the physician drew the contours. I went over and did the optimization. I think I actually like just one needle and it's done. It never happens. But I got a really, really good plan. So you can see these are all the slices for half CM thickness, right? And that they do have CM for basic seed length and everything else in the comparison. No, that's what you're looking for in seed plans. There is a multitude of ways you can plan. You can plan like this one, that like fill every single available slot for the seed, right? It's like almost every grid point is doing a seed. If you did this planning technique that is down here in the bottom one, what would you might have to do with activity with the seeds? Lower, yes. Because it just gets too hot, right? I mean, if you sit there and just put every seed, everything, it's just gonna blow up. So most of the time, we do alternative paths. So like, see this one's got it here. This seems got this row with this row's implanted. So you know how they alternate rows. And that fills in dose very nicely. It's called a peripheral loading or modified peripheral loading. It's really effective way of doing it because you got to remember the heat builds on these implants. And you don't see it, you can look at it and think, okay, maybe that's good. Okay, okay, I don't really know what we're doing that here. But normally you would not plant that far outside the crossfit. Some people do, but over. We try to get at least some of the seeds in the prostate. You can see here, that's on the edge. Again, I probably would recommend that. Yes.
Well, what would be the case if you implanted those seeds and such and it doesn't get better? And like would there be a shift in the seeds or
What do you mean it doesn't get better?
like the cancer like
The PSA doesn't drop.
yeah.
I have reimplanted patients before. We had a patient, it was really a weird case. We implanted him. He had a very high PSA. Implanted him. He came back how many months later? His PSA was over 10,000. Really just 4 months. Implanted again. So those are weird cases like that. Again, everybody said, well, once you just, understand, but the lasting effects, radiation damage, and it does, you just can't give radiation in the same area. Now, if 20 years goes by and there's some healing and new tissue, and then you might be able to do a little bit more, but most of the time you can't do much. But if you have extremely aggressive disease, it would not be surprising that you wouldn't have the clinical result that you would want. So if you did do a seed implant, what's the most common form? And probably it's true. What's the most common form of treatment?
Or chemo?
Hmm?
Chemo?
Surgery. As the number one far away most common treatment training process. So why urologists will argue for surgery? You have a higher complication rate, higher rate. But people like this, right? Because he's, the land gone. And it's out of my body, and I feel better about that. The other issue is you only have so many arrows, right? So you're especially constrained. You only can do certain things. So a lot of them will say, you know what, I'll do a resection. And then I will hope for the best, hopefully cure your cancer. If it does not, we come back with radiation. If you use radiation on the permanent, that off the table, right? I mean, you're not going to come back and full course of radiation later. So you can do prostate bed radiation later. If the initial surgery fails. So that's what a lot of some of them look at. It's okay, I'll do surgery. If it doesn't get, I get a positive local recurrence. I'll just go ahead and get the full pelvic field radiation done. And then that should give me here. So I've got kind of two shots, right? That's for the radiation. It really is driven by what people are comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with when it comes to treatment process. The other thing which has really become prevalent in the building Washington, because the argument is if you live long enough to get toxic. Pretty well. So do you really need full courses of radiation or radicals for patients to be done? Arguments are probably got something else for the problem. Yes, I have this. So you're seeing more watchful wait where patients go in their PSA done like maybe 6 months or whatever. And as the PSA rises, then they begin to say, okay, the PSA is consistently rising. Let's do something. There's positive and negatives. That's very easy to say that on the surface. Typically, you look fine. It's very hard to tell a patient you got cancer, we're not going to do anything. You just watch. And a lot of patients don't like it. Okay. So, there was one case where I was in a nuclear department down in Auckland, and the patient came in and they had prostate cancer and everything. He just watched away. He came back 6 months later and he had a lot of contracting. And we did a bone scan, he had that 14 months. He was spoiled. I mean, all of it. So that's an example where aggressive cancer is workouts. So it's tough to determine each way, but there are different ways. So I say that more globally prostate cancer, because you're going to see this in the clinic. You're going to see prostate bed patients. You're going to see primary patients that come in for prostate. You're going to start seeing stereotactic SPRT prostate. They're going to buy that. And you're going to start seeing space orders, talk about the gel because you can prostate direct. You're going to see seeding ones. You're going to see HDR prostate. Prostate is like so many choices on how to treat prostate cancer. It's a bit overwhelming. It's a lot of them. You have protons. Protons for everything. So patients want to go to proton therapy, right? So it is big. It is big. So patients sometimes get that paralysis. They don't know what to do. You just prior therapy, hormone therapy. So this is, let's see, this is a good flow. Get the patient in, get the ultrasound, contour it, dose plan, needle insertion, do the reconstruction, and then you have treatment delivery. Now this is HDR, and then you have the patient out. So it's a nice, just little kind of flow of how this kind of works. Now this one specifically inserted the HDR. If you did not have the HDR, this would just be inserted with, right? You do needle insertion, then you do your dose reconstruction afterwards. But that's exactly how it works out for us. Especially. So this is a good example of an ultrasound background. Ultrasound backgrounds are really cool. They can be problematic, but most software lets you turn them on and off. When you saw one size goes to a white background, that's what I prefer to work with. It's a lot cleaner. When you start getting all these different colored and the gracing on the back, sometimes it's very hard to see what coverages really are. So if you, I'm just curious, this is another kind of thing there. If you had this, you're like me, you're like, I can't really quite tell what to be covered, what's not. What is another way to determine how effective your implant is other than looking at the picture? What else do you have? Any implanting system?
Those volume hospitals.
Yes, DVH. When in doubt, go to your DVH. Your DVH will tell you volumes, doses, everything. It won't tell you if the hot spot is sitting in the middle of the urethra, right? I mean, it doesn't tell you that part. It may show you doses, and some of them will give you max, but it won't tell you where that max is, right? So that's why when you're in doubt, always go to your DVH. And so I found that, like, I like to go through and look at all the images, but I'll always back all and then go and look at a DDH. So, okay, where is everything in the DDH? Where is everything to set this up? And then that would be a better feel. Sometimes you look at this, you think this angle at home. You know, you're really proud of the DDH, you're like, what? Say, why is this hold there? Or sometimes you look at DDH as like a really, really good plan. And then you look at the distribution, you're like, not so much. Okay, so you have to me, you have to use both in tandem. And that gives you a better indication of what's good and what's not. So again, this is just more images for you to look at. This is typical HDR, right? Why would you think this would be an HDR image as opposed to CEDAM image? You got that idea? This is an HDR image, and this would be a CEDAM. Catheters. So these are catheters, not a lot of them, right? Versus seeds, you're going to see a lot more seeds in the plane. Catheters, you're going to have to lift it up. For HDR, you all see the ring on them, they've got like 18 channels. It's generally the high end of those HDR. Depending on the unit it goes through. So that's why you see a little bit different there. And HDR is very effective. Some people don't like HDR, but it was very effective. So, about HDR brachytherapy in general. Entering internal radiotherapy where autologous temporarily implants a catheter, small plastic tube or balloon in the tumor area places highly radioactive material inside the body for a short time and retracts using remote control. That's a good life. You use a catheter. So reading 192 is the isotopes for treatment on all HDR units is a reading 192. I'm going to zoom out to use anything else. 74-day half-life, 0.38 AD, great energy range, good half-life. So does anybody know, because I actually just came from the students' defense, what is the max dose and curies of a reading 192 solution for putting HDR? Your thoughts? Take curies. That's the max. Okay, so you can't. So like if Baring or like to ship you out of HDR strips, they would ship you out all around the Gulf Coast. It would be paid out by the time you got it, but you could not insert it into the unit. Clinical operations is what it's used. Okay, that's just what we're talking about. So, various new aftermotor that's just been released recently, now actually going to release 15 years, which is huge. That's a lot of extra feet. The problem with HDR is good bad. It's a 74-day half-life. Because what happens is it's in 3 months, it had its activity, right? So suddenly these patients that you're treating, took 7 minutes, now take 14 minutes. Doesn't sound like a lot, but the normal is 7 minutes is a long time. So you're like, oh crap, I got a low source, I got a lot of patients, it's got a lot more to treat, it's just long. So everybody likes fast. That's what he knows. So that's where the challenge happens. From these sources. So you can see the advantages is temporary quick delivery, treat anywhere in the body, localized treatment, low energy, so things are great. Disadvantages, frequent source exchange of control. Generally done quarterly, but can be done every 4 months. Complex regulations and half-life not very well. Used for a multitude of years. So the one guy didn't put in totally disadvantages, complex regulations. HDR didn't go on beyond that. Because of homeland security, HDR units have to completely be secure. It will be secured in either a locked cabinet or by a chain. In here, the size of the. Okay, so it's very cool. It's very cool. HR is really, really good. Problem with HR is it's really, really fast. So if you make a mistake, you're not going to catch it. So that's always, I've been in this field a long time. The only thing that I still always bottle by is highlighter. Because generally what happens when you do these plans, whatever, you sit there and you're delivering, you're thinking nothing but about it, right? You can sit there, you can shoot pretty quick, or you just, out of the day, I like, that's what it works. And there's not much wrong with you just being delivered and you're watching those steps. 99.9% of these things are very, mundane, routine operations. So you have this conversation, but the whole time in the back of your mind, okay, I think that I almost correct on do that taking the half seem like you're wanting to, did I conjure any sources properly? Start going through your mind. All these things that happen. Because you're just thinking, oh, but while you're doing that, you're taking all the dose, right? So suddenly you realize that, do a physics double check. Trust all the stuff back in mind, should I do that? That's right. Because by the time we figure out it's done. So, HR treatments require businesses present. The reason for that, we talk about the story where they branched big up how all the HR regulations didn't happen. I just know you the story that happened. I think it's a famous story. But businesses have to be present. You do not do an HR treatment without businesses have to. Because you're way too busy. So what happened was years ago, a site in I don't care where it was in Ohio, there was a ECR. A lot of things about it. Catheter flows tip down all sealed. The patient was treated for 2 months. There was a lady out of the nursing home. She was treated planned. They rolled the patient into the ball because he's reforming the house and getting sharp ball with not expecting the suite. Or then that ball with not expecting the suite. So they rolled her in, they treated her. And they got done. There was no physicist present for the report. And as they're rolling the patient out, the primary involved with you all know what primary is, right? That links when radiation is present. That's how it works. They're in every linear accelerating network. So when you go there, you always, you don't worry about radiation for linear, so to speak, right? Because of being golf, doesn't happen, nowhere you want. But in this case, one that there is noted that the human was born. So the other therapy told, don't worry about it. It's been doing that, it's been acting up. The patient has been rushed. A day later, even whether the hotel member standpoint story. The businesses was all tied to the child trusts and like that. And got a call from the dump, city dump. It said we have a radiation source in this. And like I was talking about, yeah, we said all the radiation monitors. They made it. And somehow they did it like that. So he immediately ran out there, went to the top of the chart, the survey. So that's when he knew the source was not in the. So long story short, they didn't have to think about. I mean, that's how they deal with stress. And she received because she went back to nurse home with source energy. And I gave nurse a 3 maybe 4 nurse nothing else is weird. So that changed the regulation and the structure that. So now go to see an HDR process. You'll see a whole series of video checks at the beginning. You see a room survey. You see a patient survey. You see a unit survey. You see all these things be done that are just like, now you can type this is not the same thing. I can't believe this is something. It was not that. You just never dreamed that a source would break all information. But again, that changed a lot. And of course, the patient died from it. But that's an example of how a lot of these regulations change it. You have to survey, you have to manage, you have to review, you have to possibly this. That's the only way to make this happen. If you don't do that, then 99.9 times out of 100, nothing won't happen. There's gonna be that one time that it does happen, is gonna be an issue. And not that you really see this, but it is, engagement, the review plan, too. It's got needs. So this is a typical brachytherapy source. HDR, we're in 192 source. Up here, how small it is. You can see the different measurements here, 2.5 millimeters there. This is the classic model. It's probably been updated since then. And, so you can file for routine capsule outside the back. There's all the way to center this actual source you get the two. If you go on your clinical rotations and somebody does a source exchange, let me go sit through it. Because there's a lot of processes they have to do in order to make those source exchanges. And to verify that these sources are going in and out correct. So these are important to know. Physical length, total channel length, reference length. When you're looking at when people reference distances, what they mean. Okay. So the physical length goes to the tip end. The total channel length goes to right here. And then the reference length is right here through the middle of the source. Okay. So those are important because if not, you get shifts, right? You get shifts in where the actual source is. So you have to know where all these distances are and where you're actually shifting the source because a millimeter in source variation in shift is significant, is a very significant difference in dose distribution on those particular setups. So you have to understand what people reference. And so we'll talk a little bit about that on the planning side of this. This is a typical HDR unit. They're very top heavy because all the shielding at the top. So when you move them, you have to be very, very careful. They're easy to turn over if you don't do it right. Everybody know what this is? Yes. Okay. Well check. That's how we calibrate. We'll run all the way down to the well check measure. And this again, just another picture of the source, 3D source. It is all just information purposes. And the different units. They're much more advanced than they used to be. Used to be you had to have a key card and transfer the information out. It's not all through DICOM, which is the anymore. So you might know what that is. That is a light sig out. So that's for skin treatments. So HDR can be used for skin applications. We talk about the internal right bracket, that's what we kept focusing on. Put the source in the patient. That is where you put it actually on the lesion and it goes down and it delivers dose. So light sig applicators are very effective at treating skin cancers. Very good at it. A little bit problematic setting up. It can be a little bit of a challenge, but it's very effective. There's our HDR applicator there. Here you have a flap. There you have a surface applicator, which you can do using the different light sig applicators. And you can just see all kinds of different things. This is dose distribution. You can actually driving. Why do people like HDR planning? Because I can basically do an inverse optimization. Right? We talked about IMRT. Well, I can do that with HDR. Can't do it with seeds, right? And I put seeds in there. They're kind of where they're at. There's definitely nothing I can do. HDR is not so much. HDR is I can say the seeds here, and I can say how I want that seed. And then if I don't like where that needle ended up, I'll put a little more dose on this needle, a little more dose on this needle, and compensate for that needle maybe not being placed as well. So you've got a lot of opportunities. So HDR really does have almost an inverse optimizing algorithm in it to say, I'm going to go back, here's my needle parameters, now give me a distribution on that line. So people really, really like the HDR aspect of it because you can actually sculpt the dose almost like we do in 3D. Can't do that with cesium, you can't do that with iron. Once they're in there, they're in there. You have to accept what was basically there. Okay. So with all this stuff and delivering these treatments, we have to worry about QA. QA is the lifeblood of physics, period. No matter what you do, QA, you can't do too much QA. But the key thing in some of the practice guidelines, which I know you all read, but in the practice guidelines, there's a lot of stuff that's moved up. So there's task group reports here in practice guidelines. We've had this conversation before. But what's the point in the relationship in correlation between the practice guidelines and the task group reports? You might want to mentor again. Which came first, chicken or the egg? So the task group report come first or the MPPG?
Task groups.
Task group is the it's a egg. So then MPPG. What's the point of MPPG with regards to the task group?
How to do the task group.
Pseudo, how to do the task group, but also what you really need to do for the task group. So the argument of the MPPG is that everything in the task group is not being done. It's important, it's informative, but you don't need to do it. So one of the lectures that we did in Southeastern chapter meeting was that we had some physicists come up that were on the MPPG 90 or something about that. So their argument was it was actually very, very interesting. They came in and said, wait a minute. We do monthly chromium CT analysis of image. What they determine is accurate, at least from my viewpoint. You're never going, the time you have an image quality issue on your analysis of chromium CT, they will have already complied. In other words, the small variations you pick up are going to be insignificant to the variation that's going to get to their point where they're going to have a problem. So why are you doing it monthly? There was no value in doing it monthly. TG 142 says do it monthly. They're saying you don't need to do it monthly. So the task group reports pull that out. I mean, I'm sorry, the MPPG pulls that out and says do it a little bit less frequently. Maybe you need to do this black symmetry to the same level that you do there. No, we don't find there's a big of a need. That's not a variability, so change that for changing the guys. So that MPPG came to put a human element and a human review of tasks. Say, we only have so much time in the day, right? I mean, no matter what, we all have 24 hours each day. Nobody here is any different. I think you are or not. 24 hours a day. Maybe you sleep most of those 24 hours, and that's possible. So, but you only have the same amount of hours. So if you're going to do QA, the argument on the practice guidelines is do the QA that matters. Do the QA that's going to find a problem. Do the QA that's going to improve patient care. Don't do QA because you just, ran it, good, never anything wrong with it, waste my time. With that being said, QA on a high dose rate equilibrium is an extremely aspect of treatment because what we talk about, everything happens really fast, the delivery happens, it's over, it's done, and you need to know that it's going to work when it goes. So it is really critical to ensuring that safe delivery. If there's a failure in daily QA, that gives you a chance to either rectify it, not do treatment, or come up with an alternative plan so the treatment can continue. It consists of number of tests, position, activity, safety checks, ring blocking, and others. Say what else, but that's what's on. So position. Why is it position important in HDR? I'm like someone with this and we may just call it an eye right now. Okay, so we need the dose to go where it's going to go, right? So can anybody? So tell me, how can I check? Can somebody tell me how to do a positional test in HDR? No, part of it. Camera. With cameras on this. And source. That's move it back. It moves it back. This right. Good. How do you know what position what it means?
And Mark.
Okay, so what was this then? That was good. I mean, you're going right along the vein. There's a couple ways to do it. Camera's the best. Put a camera in, put something with known hash marks in it, given distance from a catheter, right? Because you're gonna have to run it through a catheter. And you're gonna say, I'm gonna run out to 995 millimeters, okay? Because most of the catheters are like meters long catheters. We'll run to 995, and it'll be right on this particular hash on this catheter. And then I'm gonna move it a half cm or a cm. I'm gonna move it several times. I'm gonna watch it to make sure it moves. That verifies that when I told to go 995, it went to 995. When I told to go 950, it went to 950. And I verified that. You can do that with a camera, and a lot of people do that. The used to be people would put it on film. They would take dummy sources, put the catheter, take the catheters to the film, X-ray film, right? And then they would have the dummy catheters there on film, and then they would run it out and see if it overlaid the dummy catheters. That's another way to do it too. So there's a couple ways you can do it. Most people need to wait just to get that to go off time. But positional accuracy is critical because if it is off, and it doesn't happen often, but it can. And the importance of positional applicators are used because one time they treated a patient, Ravens blood. It was a cylinder, right? A cylinder. You're good for that. They used supposed to use 100 or 1,000 millimeter, 1 meter tape, right? Catheter. They used a 15. They got the wrong one. So the patient got burns down their leg. And they're like, why is their legs turning red? I mean, just blistering red. Had the wrong leg. Catheter was not for a catheter. They had an extra 50 centimeters on that catheter. So it was stopping outside the patient to pull that trigger. You think there's no way you'd be stupid enough to do that. It happens. And this is what happens. You get involved, somebody's not double checking, doing a sign off of the delivery, making sure I'm using a 100 meter or 1 meter catheter instead of 1.5 meter catheter. I mean, it's huge. Huge issues can occur. Positional accuracy is very easy to follow up, but very easy to verify. Okay, so those are things. A lot of times, tell people use the same catheter, right? So if I've got my transfer, tube that I've, got it connected in, I'll use the same one every time. I will make sure that I use the exact same one every time, just so there's no chance that I get it. Activity. We all know sources decay at a certain rate. Okay, that's just a fact. Physics is physics. Nothing's going to change that. So you're thinking, well, how can we be wrong with activity? So how can the activity get bumped up? Anybody have an idea? How could it get screwed up?
Daylight savings.
Yeah, an hour wouldn't get you in trouble. But a long month, a long day of the week, affects your activity. Something happens with your computer, used to be some are different now, but your computer set time was what was set time when your planning system. So if that failed or there was a reset or something got entered wrong, your activity would be completely off. 74 day half-life, that's a big impact, right? If it was a 30-year, a week or two here and there is going to be irrelevant. You're not even going to know the difference time you're having. But a 74 day, if you were all 30 days or 15 days, then it's a dramatic change in dose. Okay, so activity is different. Safety checks, you want to make sure that when the ring locks, it locks. You don't want to have the ring pop off or one of the. It should alert you that it's not in place. If it goes through all the sulfur boots, it ought to know when something is not correct. So you need those safety checks. The ring lock is a big one because if it doesn't lock correctly, you have to be careful. What is another thing that I put on here is dummy source. So there's two sources in HDR, right? There's the real source and there's the fake source. So the purpose of the fake source is before the real source goes out, the fake source goes out. And the big source will go all the way out to the predetermined depth or distance, wherever we want to look at it, to make sure it's clear. If that dummy source can't reach it, it immediately errors out, and says, I can't reach it. So if I have a 1500, I think I'm treating 1.5 catheter, and I've got a 1 on there, and I deliver it to 134, and it hits the end of that catheter, the dumb's going back, can't reach stop treatment. So that's safety measure, right? It wants to make sure that there's no kinks or anything in there. It can safely get out and get back all the time. So that's again something let's check. So daily QA on HDR, go to a site that has HDR, sit in on it. It's really important that you understand it. You might be tasked with it. There'll probably be questions on it anyway for your reports. But it's important. So let's talk a little bit about EHDR. I'm a big fan of EHDR. So we're still talking about high dose therapy. We're still talking technically about brachytherapy. We're talking about EVS, electronic brachytherapy. And so everything looks the same, right? No, but the difference is there's no isotope. It's an X-ray, high output X-ray, infinite half-life, never changes. It's always the same activity. The one out now is the primary one. There's a couple of them. There's Zolt, and then there's Zeiss. Zolt is more versatile than Zeiss, but it's 50 kV. Doesn't sound like a lot of energy, right? But it's super powerful. It's very high output. Advantage is temporary quick delivery. We already said that from the other stuff. But here, rapid dose fault, no radioactive material to handle. So you don't worry about any radioactive material. You don't have to have a radioactive material license. You don't do anything. So you have rich from the state, it's still an X-ray source, which things you got to do, but you don't do with ranks. This means high surface dose. So because the way these sources are designed, the surface dose is extremely high, can't treat deep-seated tumor sources, not as flexible as radium-192. So you're not going to get nice curved paths. It's not capable of doing that. And it's used for a multitude of cancers. That this particular Zolt source is clear to treat cancer anywhere in the body. So this is a typical unit. Looks very similar to an HDR unit, right? The difference is this is the control arm. The source rests on this nest and goes in and out from this standpoint. And this is built in well chamber, so it's a self-sufficient type design that well chamber and electrometer are all housed within this particular unit, so all the calibrations can be done internally. This is a typical source. Okay, this is older design. They have new gel fit. It's decent size. I don't have a really. I should have a better slide than that. Maybe I'll have one up here. But it's fairly thick. These tubes here are connectors for water flow. Water is for this particular source. They have come up with a new one called Dalton, which is an inert liquid that does not degrade the source. The problem with water is water degrades the source over time. The Dalton is not. So this is the layout of the connections of it, and this is that connection. And here's your little water bag, and this is a pump that actually pumps the water through it to the pool. It gets very, very hot. The water is very effective at removing the heat. And here's some applicators that you use with the HDR. These are skin applicators, okay? Really, really very effective at treating skin lesions, and you can do these intraoperatively as well. Okay, these applicators can be opened up abdominally, or let's say, for example, and placed right on the tumor and deliver a treatment. These are cylinders, just like you'd use, same for HDR cylinder treatments combinations. And then these are the balloons. So this is a balloon with a central lumen. You would use this for breast cancer. It's also being used for brain cancers as well. Put into the during a craniotomy that you iterate with built with balloon to treat 20 grades of tumor. So this is the size of the X-ray. So you can see it's tiny, right? So you're thinking, well, why is it not as easy to move around? It's because the water, the chamber that needs the sheet around it that it needs makes it get a little bit larger and not as versatile as the original source. It uses a lot of versatility when it comes to reading. So these are two things. So this is an isodose distribution for an HDR Iridium 192 source. You notice it kind of comes in right on the edges, right? This is the anisotropy effect. The capsule, the way the design of the capsule brings in the dose on the end. As you can see here, this is nice curved on the outer edges, right? Because the design of the X-ray source is forward peaked. So you don't have that pull in of the actual radiation at the end, you have a nice dome effect. So this actually works really well for cylinder cases because you really want the vaginal cup treated on cylinder cases, and it's not as effective by doing this iridium because it comes in full down the edges and this blows out. So it actually works out well for the types of treatments. So data QA, same things, critical and ensuring safe delivery, position, source string, safety checks, ring locking, what else? So somebody one time asked me, so we care about the position, right? I mean, position is important in this. But what about source string? Why is that important? You're thinking, didn't I just tell you everything's the same? Didn't I just tell you everything is the same? Never changes activity. Why is that important?
Because that's, and it's important because that's where the dose is coming from. Versus,
Yeah, it's important because the output can vary with temperature pressure, right? So you have to verify that output on a daily basis or before it runs. So it's important that you analyze that. So source string has an important component. It's not the same as we normally think. Okay. So, but it does have an important component. So what I want to show you is the in this slide that I want to show you. So this is a case study that we did with DHER. So we got the system many years ago, and I've treated GYN cancer, brain, breast, skin, and so we were doing primarily GYN treatments with it. And so the physician I had the system were like, okay, we had this really great lady come in, and she's 77 years old, long neglected skin cancer on the face, had it for many years, but had recently increased in size, which is pressure holding here and everything. She had it for 10 years. It started out there basically the tip of it, and so it was the side of this thing. And it was a beta set. Okay. So this sounded pretty good. And this was, she used honey on this, by the way. She did not use honey on beta cells, apparently a laxative. And this is really prevents. Okay. She was going to get electron therapy. She was not get electron therapy, but she was big crazy. I mean, we probably I won't even say her name because I think back to we see it 3 times for years. So she came, she got treated. We never saw her again. No one wanted to see her again. But miracle she got into treatment. Okay, so we had not used the EHDR DX on a skin cancer. This is our first case. So physician and I got together, like, if you ever want to try it, let's try it. So we use the biggest pound, 50 millimeter pound that we could get. It actually did encompass this. The benefit is here, as you can see, it's kind of coming down, right? It's coming down into the eyelid area. So we all know electrons have trouble, like on curved surfaces, right? They break down. Photons have a little bit better results because they don't fall down. So that's one reason we're excited about using the KB instead of the electron. So we agreed to do this. She got 40 gray, 8 fractions. Okay. 5 gray per fraction. That works out like this. Okay. So this is how we set her up. Made a mass, so she could move. Position here. Here is the surface applicator. We put a lead shield, custom lead shield around here. Then we actually put additional lead shielding over her eyes. Okay. To reduce any scatter from that standpoint. So we treated to a depth of 5 millimeters. Okay, that was the depth. So again, we're talking about this got a very short distance because of the energy. So you generally can't treat really deep. So 5 millimeters is the max they really want you to do. I've done more than that, but all the way. But 5 millimeters is much more. So that's what we do. This was the setup. So the unit, the cool thing about this is you can be in the room with the patient during the treatment, which you can't in the room. So you can stand there you can either have a lead barrier shield or you can just wear lead aprons. So we chose to wear lead aprons. And then this monitors the entire room. So we can watch the whole room. And we set it up where you can see the patient. They can talk to the patient, the therapist in the room can talk to the patient, everybody, can be calm, right? Because it's scary for some of these patients to be in a room by themselves, hear all these sounds going, radiation. You've got to be very exact and placement. The therapist can see up close to make sure the patient's being cooperative. So this is how it works. Set them up. So after 2 weeks treatment, which is half therapy treatment, this is what it looks like. So you see it's breaking down tremendously. You get very angry at this point. I'll go over and get detailed after the 17th version is terrible. I know that, but it broke down significantly, right? You can see the edema around the skin edges and the back. But that's what we want to see, right? It's true. So in last stage or last fraction, see full necrosis. Everything's working much, much better. So 1 month post, nicely. One little area here is still healing. It's starting to look much better, right? I mean, it's dramatic improvement. And then the last slide, 6 months post there. Complete resolution. You would never know if it had something that size on the board. She was thrilled. I mean, she was thrilled. We never looked like it. So she did authorize her this. So, but that's an incredible result out of this treatment. So that's what I'm saying. Very powerful. 50 kV. Electrons go very deep, right? So if you were to do a 16 eV, the D max on the 16 eV is what? What's the D max on the 16 eV? Sure. What's the max depth on the 611? Approximately. Here's something. No, that's not. 1.3. 1.3 is a round D max. So it's not even hit max dose, so it's 1.3 cm below the skin, where this is peaking out. We're prescribing 5 millimeters. So that's the problem. Electrons go way deep in the patient. So electrons are not ideal for a situation like this, where photons in a KV source is very optimal for something like this. And patients get really, really good judgment systems. So this is an example of a patient that benefited significantly from. So that's the cool thing about it's not technically brachytherapy, but it's electronic brachytherapy. These are things brachytherapy can do that external being really can't do effectively, right? If you're talking about, you know, 5 cm and trying to put on an electron and position the patient and get it and not have the ballooning of isodose lines, so that you don't have any of that in something like this. So that's why so many people like this type of treatment. And that's why it's still done in the US because it's very valuable for knowledge to have. So any questions on BRAC? Y'all experts know? So post homework will be due next week. Later, so I'll make sure it stays within my canvas. The last day I think we determined, or Bridget told me, is May 8th. I don't know you. May 8th is the last class I'm in, for sure, post home. That's when your projects are due for presentation. Okay, so I don't really care the order. Everybody can fight for the order, or I can just pick somebody, the other person, doesn't really matter. So it's funny how some people like to go first and people want to go last. That vary. Remember, approximately 11 minutes, 12 minutes for presentation and a couple minutes for questions. If somebody doesn't ask one, I'll ask it. I try to just sit back. I mean, I'm not there to finish you off. Just, to ask questions and to understand your depth of knowledge. Issues is, AI to do presentation for you. We do a little bit. So we'll do that and we'll go through that. Part of that rubric, I think the rubric says, but if it doesn't, I'll remind you this, is to stay on. You don't want 25 minutes. Okay. So what I'm going to encourage you is to keep in mind, practice your presentation. You're ready to deliver in the timeline that is specified, because that's what you need to make sure you stay focused on, that you're working within a specific timeline. Because when you get there, because I know a couple of you have orals at the 8 p.m. These are all timed. These are all specific. You have to learn to stay within the guidelines of what a time presentation is. The other thing, we have lab tomorrow night. Lab will be at 5:30. It will be on, I think last one was multi-nets. This will be cranial. We think, a couple of you had worked in earlier, we think we solved it with just some monitors not turned on. Hopefully that will solve the problem. We won't have the same issue, but it will be 5:30 tomorrow night in the same lab, and go from there. So hopefully that will run smoothly. And final course will be a take home. And one thing, just kind of fill you in, we're going to, we talked about this earlier, the residencies are never done. We placed pretty much, I think, at the average US numbers were down this year. One thing that we kind of talked about as a clinical group is going to be a requirement in the fall is that you're going to have to do mandatory mock interviews. We've always made these optional, but we're going to change it in the fall. It will be mandatory. And things to your benefit. Like I said, a lot of people think they interview well, shockingly most of them don't. So we're going to make sure we kind of critique you, give you some pointers, and make sure you kind of understand what to work on. Because residency is going to happen quickly, these will be match, and other things are happening very, very fast. So we want to kind of be on the front end of that before those processes come up. The residency interviews vary dramatically. Some will have no technical questions, some will have a tremendous amount of technical questions. One of my former students told me that one of the grad students where she was at had a 3-hour interview with nothing but technical questions. I can't imagine it. So anyway, you'll see in a minute. So what we're trying to prepare you for is just little tricks of the trade and things that you can talk about, and things about how to do an interview, your body language, and how to respond, and be prepared for questions. It's always more difficult in a Zoom environment. And you'll be passed around like hors d'oeuvres. I mean, you will be interviewing a lot of people in a session. It can be sometimes, like I said, some people have gone, 20 different interviews a day. And it's a lot. It's a lot to take in. So just try to kind of prep that to go from there. Any general questions?
What would you recommend moving to the
Well, the match will come around. You'll have to, recommend everybody, you don't have to apply to the match. But you kind of have to apply to the match since we're the majority of the program you're at. So you apply to the match, there will be ones that will open up that are non-match related. Okay. Those you will want to immediately reach out to as soon as they open up. And my recommendation is introduce yourself. I mean, they're gonna get inundated. It's kind of like you put up a picture of everybody like boom, 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 just don't have this long drawn out and expect to get this warm conversation like, hey, let's just talk over immersion coffee. And there are gonna be people, probably 50, 60, 70, 80 people trying to apply to these programs. It's a lot. So if you just want to do a general introduction, maybe ask a couple of questions. The one thing I've always tried to tell students, learn a little bit about the program you're going to talk to, not enough to look like a brown nose, like I'm just, I'm reading in your place all my life, and I can't believe there's a residency position. They don't want to hear that. But understand a little bit about what they're doing, a little background on the program, how long they've had it, what they offer at their site. Give a little bit, like I know a little bit about what's going on. That's always helpful in these processes. But what we try to prepare for you, we're going to get your resume and your application where it needs to be. And a lot of times we're like, hey, let us review your application. Let us review your letter of kind of intent, what you're trying to do, your background letter, your CV. Let us look at all that before we submit it. Choose your people who you're getting letters of reference from wisely. Make sure you're getting people that know you. You get people that don't really know you, that it's hard for them to write a letter of recommendation, right? So they're gonna write a more bland letter of recommendation. If you find people that feel that they can write a strong one, then do that. It can be your major professor. It can be, Ramsey, it can be me, Hedrick, it can be Brett Miller, or it can be wherever. People that you spent time with, and those that carry your weight, right? Because it's easier for me to write a letter of reference, strong letter of reference when I actually have dealt with students on it than when I've not dealt with student at all. And that goes across anybody writing a letter of reference. But it does come quick. Some of the interviews start happening in December, so they go fast. So you just have to be prepared for that. So that's what we're trying to get everybody. And I think these mock interviews will occur in early fall, probably like September, October. And I'm not sure when I've seen it. I don't remember when ADR started in part one. I would not put that as high worry on your list right now. Let's get everything else done. You're not eligible to sit to it if you complete all the 4 classes. So you can't sit to it with 24. Nobody's going to approve. So just focus on your. The other thing is research wise, write your research up early as you can and get to it. Okay. So what we have is like some students that have defended that are doing multiple projects, that have done a project and did a second project, never all the record first project until they're ready to start, get ready to defend. And they forgot some stuff on the first project or what they did and all the nuances of writing it up. So kind of encouragement to write your stuff up as you do it. So if you're doing, let's say, 2 projects, you're working on a project this spring and this summer, write it up when it's done. Write up some of the key components because if you wait 6 months, 9 months, whatever, you're going to come back and you're going to get part of the work that you did and being able to go and talk about it. And so it's better just to go ahead and write it up and save yourself some time because it's going to be, you're going to have to do it anyway. How many of you are all going to APM? No, okay. So that'll be a good experience. You'll meet a lot of people there. You'll meet people at the job boards. You'll meet people during discussions, like we have the posters. There'll people come up and ask you questions. You'll make a lot of contacts there. So that's okay. That's a really good opportunity to get a feel for what's going on. It's there's usually about 3,000 or 4,000 people that's in that meeting. And so it'll be a really good experience. So those who, whether you give an oral, whether you give a interactive, or whether you give a poster, you're just going to run into a lot of people. And you'll meet a lot. The good thing is there'll be a lot of vendors. People, we'll talk about it. Encourage you to go to the vendors, go up, see the products, see what they're doing, get a feel for it, and meet people. So that's how you get your name out. So, any other questions?
Yeah, right. We're gonna render the author's letter. Here's these, right?
Everybody here got in. Okay, so there wasn't anybody. Some got 10 plus, some got one. There's, most people are happy they got one. So it's changing a little bit. More interviews does not always indicate better results. Right? I try to tell people it just takes the right match, right? It just takes the right guy. So if you limit yourself geographically, I've had some students do this. I don't recommend this, then you're going to be limited, right? If you're only going to apply to residencies that are, 150, 200 miles, you're going to have to say what you get. And that's not very good. I recommend everyone to apply to. And like today, Rams told us somebody got cancer centers down that Atlanta match with a 12 person on the list. So rank everybody. When you go through the rank them all, you never know who you're going to pull into. Like we got one student that's University of Mississippi. I just talked to him the other day. He's a resident Bishop's first year. He had no chance of getting Mississippi. He's like, no, they told me that they're going to do a second interview, and I didn't get the second interview. He's like, so I didn't get him. He got matched with Mississippi. You can't assume anything. It's kind of weird. This algorithm, what happens behind stage, that you don't see, and other people rank, or they pick so and so, but that person picks somebody else, and they pick them. It matches all up. So it's kind of a dicey. It's kind of a really just a black box. So we'll go through this as we go along, but I tell people to open it up. I mean, within a reason. If you're like, there's zero chance you live in California, then don't apply to residency in California. But don't just say, I want to apply to be interested in Mayo and all these places that are the prestigious places, because you're only going to go against the top of the top, which is not what you want to do. You want to open up opportunities, because if you get a residency anywhere, they're all really good. I mean, they're very strict requirements to get residencies. No one's going to say, I'm going to come out of residency. Oh, you came out of UCLA. Wow, you're great. You came out of, let's say LSU. Crap, there's none of that. You get out of a residency, you're going to have a simple opportunity to go to where you want to. And there will be people beating down your door for a job. Okay, so you're going to have no problem with that. So I encourage people to be open to who they apply to in residency, hone your interview skills, it was one job interview you don't want, and just learn plenty what you want to do. Okay. If you want to focus on therapy, focus on those therapeutic aspects. If you want to do diagnostic, focus on the diagnostic aspects. You're going to apply the diagnostic residencies, right? We had one student that didn't get thought he was going to get matched, didn't get matched, but ended up getting the residency. It happens all the time. There's a lot of post residency things that go back. We had one student that was 2 years ago. I have no idea how he did match. It's beyond me, because he should have been matched. And he's pretty bummed. And within less than a week of the match, he was out. So it does happen. So you just kind of have to kind of play that game. You have to be open to things and realize there's a lot of shit going on. But it's more to come on that, and we'll definitely keep it. Things will start making more sense after the summer. Once you've been in the clinic, once you kind of see how things go, operations, and spend some clinical time, things are going to start going a lot faster. Right now, this has been all book, right? You've spent some time like Covenant in the labs, but that's not clinic. That's not seeing patients treating. That's not going in the OR. That's not seeing real things with patients actually happening. Those things will begin to change. And that will open your mind up a little bit more and be a little bit more comfortable, because they're going to ask this in residency. So one of the reasons I think mentioned earlier, the residency died this year, or not died, but I mean, it was 83% last year, and I hear it's around 60% this year, is because a bunch of MP assistants entered the residency match. And what was the result? They went after the MP assistants. Because why? Because they know the way around the clinic. So you walk in and suddenly, okay, I don't have to explain everything to you. So that's why you want to take opportunities to get clinical work. If you have an opportunity to be in the clinic, find a way to be in the clinic. The more you're in the clinic, it makes a residency process much easier for them, and they know what to do. You don't know everything, and no one expects you to, so don't ever think you have to know everything, and I don't know how to do this, that's okay. But since calibration, done some scripting. That's around fusions, participating in monthly QAs, done, poured some electron blocks, done, played with some treatment planning. That's all golden to residency programs because it's a lot less work than they have to do. It's not a guarantee, but it definitely moves you up. You can have perfect grades, and that's perfect, but there's a more kind of tangible piece that people miss. It's about what can you do with what, and that'll make more sense out of this rotation. Which I'll probably send out summer rotation. Into this meeting twice next week. So. Yeah. Scaring us. Yeah. I think. Thank you.